The time has finally come, and in this video, I'm going to be building one of the most bonkers gaming PCs I have ever put together. With an RTX 4090, a 13th gen Core i9, and the new Deepcool Quadstellar Infinity. Would you just look at this? But is this a system that anyone should actually build? Well, I spent my hard-earned cash to find out, and I'm hoping later on that the answer is a yes. Without any further ado, let's do this. The Corsair Xeneon 32-inch gaming monitor is a panel that packs a punch, bringing your games and media to life on a vibrant, ultra-slim 32-inch IPS 4K display. It's a panel with some power. What's more, the fast 144Hz refresh rate and nippy 1 millisecond response time ensure you can keep a competitive edge. Learn more about the Xeneon 32 UHD 144 at the first links in the description below, and buy now on the Corsair web store. I'll be splitting this video into 3 core sections. First, the parts I picked and why. Second, the build where I actually put it together and hopefully don't have too many dramas along the way. Oh. Third, and finally, how does this thing perform? Let's begin by looking at the parts, and I want to take a deep dive into the case in a moment, but first, let's tick off the CPU and the GPU. This is the ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 4090. The 4090 is the market leader in terms of graphics cards, and if the rumours are true, AMD's new releases aren't particularly going to come close. They're more of a 4080 than a 4090 killer. With support for DLSS 3, fantastic ray tracing, and loads of straight rasterization performance, if you've got a stupid amount of money to spend, the RTX 4090 is the card where you'll want to burn that proverbial cash. It pairs up very nicely with the CPU choice for this build. Wrapped inside this unassuming clear plastic packaging is the 13900K. Intel's new i9 is a behemoth. It absolutely destroys AMD's Ryzen 9 7950X competition. Plus, with 24 cores and 32 threads, this thing is a multi-threaded beast. You also get strong single-threaded clock speeds, which will deliver near 6 GHz or over if we overclock, but more on that a bit later. For now though, let's unbox this Deepcool Quadstellar Infinity and see what their latest and greatest massive chassis is all about. Now, from the front, it's not that big. From the side, it's very, very deep. So this thing, wow, it's a bit crazy really. This box is so big. Oh, wow. Oh my goodness me. Oh my, oh. Earthquake. This is so big. Oh, wow. Look at this. And here it is. What did I say? It's not small. Now, this thing here actually somehow supports all of the latest and greatest standards in terms of motherboards and cooling. I believe it said on the front it's got room for like 5 120mm fans. You can fit 2 360mm radiators, mini ITX, micro ATX, AATX, and EATX motherboards. So I could have just said all the motherboards, but that sounded more dramatic. And like a chamber design, basically, where you have different things in different chambers. That's best demonstrated if I spin it round. And you can see at the back here, you've got room for the power supply in this kind of bottom left chamber. I don't know what goes in here. The radiator goes in here. Then you've got motherboard tray and PCI lanes in the middle here with room for your I/O. And then I believe a PCIe riser section at the top so that if we wanted our GPU to have its own chamber, it could do. Everything is fairly confined to the chamber it's in. So the power supply is just in this one. Your GPU's just in this one. But the motherboard does stretch across all of these two and this kind of middle core section. Now, if you take a look at the front, oh, it's a lot of spinning this case around. You can see we've got some like Infinity RGB. That must be where the name comes from. You've got these removable, I think they might be like airflow flaps, which you can open up to allow for more airflow in the case. Your I/O's obviously sort of on the side / the front, and we've got a Deepcool logo in the middle as well. Oh my god, is that the power button? No way. Oh, this is so cool. And loads and loads of tempered glass. I mean, it's not cheap, but you can thank all of the metal and all of the glass in this case for the fact that it's quite so expensive. Motherboard wise, I've got the ASUS Z790 Plus Wi-Fi. It matches up with the TUF design on the graphics card, creating sort of an all-in-one build and gives us overclocking support. It is DDR4, meaning I can add in this Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro SL. Typically, with an i9 or an i7, I would go DDR5, but the performance differential is basically next to nothing. Plus, DDR4 kits tend Plus, DDR4 kits tend to run faster than their DDR5 counterparts, and with lower latencies, I mean, you're not really losing all that much by picking up a DDR4 memory kit. Everything is just falling. Cooling is going to be provided by this. This is the Deepcool LT720. I've seen a few early reviews of this where people say it's very, very good. Deepcool have always been pretty good on the cooler front, and although these included fans look quite nice, I'll of course be swapping them out for some RGB ones a little bit later. If cooling is a little bit of a challenge, as suggested in this case, or at least in the last generation of this case, going for something with plenty of fans and a big radiator size is always going to be beneficial. Finally, power will be provided by Thermaltake's Toughpower 1350. I went for it because it's one of the highest wattage power supplies on the market, full stop, giving plenty of juice for a build like this and all of the components inside. That's enough of the parts though. The only way to really figure out whether this case and the GPU and everything else are actually a good fit is to get this build put together. So let's do this and see what's the worst that can happen. There's something about the ASUS tough lineup of motherboards that I just really like the look of. The Z790 boards as well from ASUS were really solid. We've reviewed this one over on the website. We like its feature set, its IO's pretty good, with 20 gigabit and 10 gigabit USB-C and 2.5 gigabit Ethernet for good measure. It's a really, really solid board and a lot cheaper than some of the other options, which is nice. For a high-end build, there can be no other real decent option than the i9-13900K. As I mentioned earlier, just way better than some of the AMD choices and a solid upgrade on Intel's previous 13th gen range of processors. There is something really satisfying as well about filling all of the RAM DIMM slots on a motherboard. 32 gigs should be good for this build, but if you wanted to push things further, 64 will also work well, especially if you're doing things like video editing, where more memory is definitely beneficial. As you guys will have seen in previous builds as well, Seagate's Firecuda 530, the storage in this system, it's just one of those really easy drives to recommend. It's going to give you 7 gigabytes read and write per second, so very, very fast in terms of speed. And with 1, 2, or 4 terabyte capacities available, there really is a drive designed for everyone. Take the heatsink off, and then I can leverage the toolless ASUS M.2 installation method to add the drive in and just add this little clip in to keep it all secure. The heatsink then goes back on, but remember to take off this bit of plastic, something which will keep the heat pad nice and fresh for when you first install it onto a drive like this one. And then the motherboard assembly is basically complete, but before I whack this in, I am going to do some prep for the cooler. Just get the basic mounting, installation and hardware done now. I was trying to do that when it's inside the Quadstellar is going to be like trying to fit hands in a gotta save this.
Later that same evening.
Hands in a really small PC case where you're going to cut yourself and it's not going to be a very pleasant experience. That was a good save. Could have got cancelled there, but we're all good. Hallelujah. Oh, okay. I got that wrong. The panels individually don't come off. The whole section comes off. So there's one section, and I'm hoping these are identical so that I haven't got to remember which one went where. But they look pretty identical to me. Here we go, second one. The ones at the bottom could be a little bit more of a challenge because they've got feet on. So I'm not super sure what's going to happen when I remove this. There we go. Number 4. We're getting there, but there's still a bit of work to be done. So this is the next thing I think I'm going to try and remove, just so we can get better access to the motherboard tray, which lies underneath. And then the board should just slide in like this. Oh yes. Kind of sits sort of like at a 45-degree angle and screws in actually fairly easily. You've just got to take off lots of the panels to make it a bit more easy to access. So 3 screws at the top, 3 along the middle, 3 down the bottom, and the board is all in nice and easily. Whoopsie. Oh yes, it's going in. It's a bit of a squeeze and a bit of a mess and a little bit tricky, but it does at least now seem to be working and screwing in. So we've got the radiator in push-pull. Airflow can be a bit of a challenge, I've heard, in this case. So the more fans, the better, but the tolerances on these screws just a little bit tight. So if we get both of these in, I'm going to be feeling a lot happier. Then the case can come down and the pump can go on next using these 2 included brackets, which come with the CPU cooler and provide that LGA 1700 mounting hardware support. In theory, nice and simple. Then it's a simple case of trying to get the water block to reach. Oh, just about. Look at that. Very, very tight indeed. With some thumb screws to follow and secure this whole thing down down into place. Not the most ideal config ever, but it should fit a-okay. The water block cover then fastens back on. I think we might have to embrace it being upside down though. Move those tubes a bit. And aside from all the fingerprints, that's looking, I want to say, pretty good. Now, earlier on in the video, literally a minute or two ago, I removed this thing. Now, this thing is the plate that we need to actually add back into place to allow for the installation of a graphics card back up here. So I'm going to add this in with some more screws and then try and squeeze the ASUS triple slot 4090 in. Of course, I'll need a PCIe riser as well, and I've picked this one up, which I'll link down below. It's Gen 4, meaning we get all the bandwidth from the new flashy GPUs. The thing that I'm a bit worried about is the height of the graphics card. Is it going to be too tall above the PCIe sort of rear bracket to fit? Is a question that is increasingly becoming more pressing. But I suppose there's only one way to find out, and that's to actually slide it in. The length looks okay. The height, oh, it's tight, but I think it's going to be all right. Oh my goodness me. Progress update, it sort of fits. Whether or not the power cable's going to go in or not is a whole other question, but I'm going to deal with that problem later. For now, you are watching me use a cable tie to prevent some of the GPU sag, and at least support it for now while I find a more permanent solution. On a level though, this might actually work. Like, that is actually perfect. And the cable tie is so small that you're not even really going to see it. Oh my goodness me. That's amazing. I think after this ordeal, I need a bit of a break. But it's looking good. And it all fits. It's just whether or not we can get that GPU power cable in a bit later. If not, I do have a backup plan. I suppose the only way to figure out whether or not the power cable fits is to, well, install the power supply. And that's where the Thermaltake 1350 comes in. As I mentioned earlier, is it overkill? Of course it is. But is it a bad choice? Absolutely not. With this being a fully modular unit, that's going to help keep cable clutter to a minimum. And the 80 Plus Gold certification also shows that the thing is overall pretty efficient. While this video won't be a full cables and wiring guide, what I will tell you is you definitely don't need this whole massive pile of cables. So you've got a motherboard power cable, first of all. You do also need to pop in some CPU power connectors, a SATA power harness for any hard drives, SSDs, and RGB controllers. And then, of course, out of my back pocket, this, a PCI Generation 5 graphics card power adapter. Once all the connections are in, it's then a really, really easy case of just adding the power supply into the bottom of the case. It'll sit through these two brackets, and a few screws will stop that from happening. Or at least they should do. That has indeed worked and secured things into place. The motherboard power cable can go in next. Lovely jubbly. CPU is next up, and then third, and finally the graphics card. Is it going to fit in there and close? Only time, I suppose, will tell. This is going to sound crazy, but I think for this to go in, the graphics card's got to come out. That goes in. And then it will clip into the riser. Just bear with me, this is going to take a bit of fiddling. And with that, the whole thing is basically done, but not quite. If I spin the case around, you guys will be able to see there's actually some mesh at the front here, which I'm going to add 2, maybe 3 fans on, depending on what fits. And that will ensure there's plenty of airflow into the case that can then be exhausted through the CPU radiator. This case is big and things can be a squeeze. I mean, a good example of that is the GPU power cable, which, although tight, now does have a bit of slack on it. So definitely not been pulled too much, even if the connector is a little bit taut. I'm going to add those fans on, add all the panels on, and then it's time to boot this thing up, check out performance, but of course first, how good this insane Deepcool Quadstellar Infinity looks when it's all turned on. Here we go, panels are on. Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, that's a job well done. Established one thing, is that this build looks awesome, but does the performance align with the looks? Well, I'm glad to report the answer is yes. And to show you, I've tested a few of the most popular titles, starting off with the brand new Spiderman Miles Morales for PC. At 4K high with DLSS enabled and set to quality, and ray tracing cranked up too, this build pulled in a solid 119 frames per second on average. 90 and 99th percentile results were pretty solid too, with the gameplay smooth overall. In the brand new Warzone 2.0 at 4K once again, high settings this time with DLSS cranked to quality, the frame rate shot even further. 137 FPS on average, nearing that all-important 144 frames per second for really competitive gaming, with consistent 90 and 99th percentiles in there for a very playable gaming experience. COD's Modern Warfare 2 at 4K, high settings again with DLSS set to quality for the same settings overall as in Warzone 2, and the frame rate was actually a bit bit higher, 165 FPS on average. If you haven't played the new story campaign mode in Modern Warfare 2, you're missing out. The new remastered title is awesome. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings is next up, and here the frame rate went even further, 305 FPS on average, with 90 and 99 percentiles in the region of 281 and 224. Consistent frame rates throughout then, with all the frame rate data measured using both MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner and NVIDIA FrameView. Finally, Apex Legends was the last game I tested out, 4K high, and here it got tantalizingly close to 200 FPS, falling just short with 198 all told. This is a build then that looks the part and performs incredibly well for gaming at 4K. Is it impractical with its huge form factor? Yes. But does it look amazing and perform equally as great? Absolutely.